Show me, Lord, show me the way. Lord, I need you to show. Please, Jesus, show me the way. The way. Because I'm down here, Lord, and I need your awesome power to show me the way. Lord, I'm your child, Lord, and I need you, Father.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome again to our Wednesday Bible study. We hope you're enjoying this series on the study of the life of David, the King of the Jews. We already know what the product looks like. And so now we're looking at the components in his life, the process that made him the man after God's own heart. Now, what I want to do, I want to just recap a little bit about what happened with Saul. 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 13 and 14. And Samuel said to Saul, "Thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of Jehovah thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would Jehovah have established thy kingdom on Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart. And the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee." I cannot overemphasize how important it is for us to obey God. Saul was king over Israel, but he was foolish because he would not keep God's command. So now what do we know about this man after God's own heart? We know David is courageous. We know that he trusts God. We know he honors and blesses God. He behaved wisely when envied by Saul and pursued by Saul. We saw that he was a true friend to Jonathan. He was a skilled warrior because of his faith. He knows that God is his refuge, as seen in his writings in the Psalms. He makes mistakes and has lapses in judgment. Can anybody say amen to that? But he always goes back to God. That's the key. Even though we live a life that is filled with errors and missteps and mistakes, and sometimes even things that we don't do mistakenly, we do intentionally. But God is always willing to accept us back if we would but turn to him. So we're picking up today's study in 1 Samuel chapter 26. And the Ziphites came unto Saul to Gibeah, saying, "Does not David hide himself in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon?" Then Saul arose and went down to the wilderness of Ziph, having 3,000 chosen men of Israel with him, to seek David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul pitched in the hill of Hachilah, which is before Jeshimon, by the way. But David abode in the wilderness, and he saw that Saul came after him into the wilderness. David therefore sent out spies and understood that Saul was come in very deed. And David arose and came to the place where Saul had pitched. And David beheld the place where Saul lay, and Abner, son of Ner, the captain of his host. And Saul lay in the trench, and the people pitched round about him. Now remember, when David cut off the part of Saul's skirt in the cave, Saul said, "I'm not going to chase you anymore." But here he is. Verse 6. Then answered David and said unto Ahimelech the Hittite, and to Abishai the son of Zeruiah, brother to Joab, saying, "Who will go down with me to Saul to the camp?" And Abishai said, "I will go down with thee." So David and Abishai came to the people by night, and behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear in the ground at his bolster. But Abner and the people lay around about him. Then said Abishai to David, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him a second time. And David said to Abishai, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against Jehovah's anointed and be guiltless? Listen to Abishai, great warrior. He said, here he is, David. Let me get him. I'm only going to have to hit him once, and he'll be stuck to the ground. But David said, no, this is the Lord's anointed. Verse 10. David said, furthermore, as Jehovah liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against Jehovah's anointed. But I pray thee, take now the spear that is at his bolster, and the cruse of water, and let us go. So David took the spear and the cruse of water from Saul's bolster, and they got them away. And no man saw it or knew it, neither awaked. For they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from Jehovah was fallen upon them. Look at how God is protecting David. Then David went over to the other side and stood on top of the hill afar off, a great space being between them. And David cried to the people and to Abner the son of Ner, saying, answerest thou not, Abner? Abner is Saul's personal guard. Then Abner answered and said, who art thou that criest to the king? David said to Abner, art not thou a valiant man? And who is like to thee in Israel? Wherefore then hast thou not kept thy lord the king? For there came one of the people in to destroy the king thy lord. This thing is not good that thou hast done. As Jehovah liveth, you are worthy to die, because you have not kept your master, the Lord's anointed. And now see where the king's spear is, and the cruse of water that was at his bolster. And Saul knew David's voice and said, is this thy voice, my son David? And David said, it is my voice, my lord, O king. And he said, wherefore doth my lord thus pursue after his servant? For what have I done? Or what evil is in my hand? Now therefore I pray thee, let my lord the king hear the words of his servant. If Jehovah hath stirred thee up against me, let him accept an offering. But if they be the children of men, cursed be they before the Lord. For they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go serve other gods. Now therefore, let not my blood fall to the earth before the face of Jehovah. For the king of Israel is come out to seek a flea, as when one doth hunt a partridge in the mountains. Then said Saul, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm, because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. Behold, I have played the fool, and have erred exceedingly. And David answered and said, behold the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and fetch it. Jehovah render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, but I would not stretch forth my hand against Jehovah's anointed. And behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by in the eyes of Jehovah, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Then Saul said to David, blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things, and also shalt still prevail. So David went on his way, and Saul returned to his place. All right. In this lesson called Mercy, Mayhem, and Madness, we first see mercy. Saul was informed by the Ziphites of David's location again. David is always being turned over to Saul. Somebody's always telling where he is. And Saul comes with 3,000 men to pursue him. While they slept, David crept in with Abishai and stole Saul's spear and water because a deep sleep from the Lord had fallen upon them. Don't miss how God is proving David, testing David. There's a deep sleep. Are you going to kill him, David? No, Lord, I'm not going to kill him. This is the second time David chose to extend mercy to Saul. Why wouldn't David kill Saul? Because he was the Lord's anointed. Saul stated after the first time in chapter 24 that he knew David would be king in Israel, and he made him promise not to end his lineage, yet he still pursued him. What does that say about Saul? It just reinforces what Samuel told him, that you refuse to obey the Lord's commandment. When that's how you are, that's what you're going to continue to do unless you change. And Saul had not changed. This is why the kingdom was taken from Saul. He didn't care what the Lord wanted. He only wanted what he wanted. But because David wanted to please God, it was easy to show mercy. So now what must we remember from this story? We must remember, first of all, that it's critical for us to obey Jehovah, obey the Lord's commands. And secondly, we need to change when we find our way is more important to us than God's way. Chapter 27. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. And Saul should despair of me and to seek any more in any coast of Israel, so I shall escape out of his hand. And David rose and passed over with 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maah, king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam and the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David was fled to Gath, and he sought him no more again for him. And David said unto Achish, if I have found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee? Then Achish gave him Ziklag that day. Wherefore Ziklag pertaineth unto the kings of Judah unto this day. And the time that David dwelt in the country of the Philistines was a full year and 4 months. And David and his men went up and invaded the Geshurites and the Jezerites and the Amalekites, for those nations were of old the inhabitants of the land as thou goest to Shur, even unto the land of Egypt. And David smote the land, and left neither man nor woman alive, and took away the sheep and the oxen and the asses and the camels and the apparel, and returned and came to Achish. And Achish said, whither have ye made a road today? And David said, against the south of Judah, and against the south of the Jerahmeelites, and against the south of the Kenites. And David saved neither man or woman alive, to bring tidings to Gath, saying, lest they should tell on us, saying, so did David, and so will be his manner all the while he dwelleth in the country of the Philistines. And Achish believed David, saying, he hath made his people Israel utterly to abhor him. Therefore he shall be my servant forever. All right. David says, okay, if I stay around, Saul's going to kill me. He knows that if Saul catches him, Saul could fight him, but he couldn't fight Saul. So he feared he would die at his hands. He said, I'm going to go into the land of the Philistines, and Saul will get tired of looking for me in the land of Israel. Now, David went to the king and is given permission to dwell in Ziklag. Then mayhem ensues. He begins to raid Philistine towns, and he kills all the inhabitants so no one can say it was him. But then when he came back with his spoils and he spoke to the king asked him, where you been? And David tells them that he raided Israeli towns. Even though we have seen much good about the character of David, there's a side of which he cannot be proud. This is part of the process of making the final product, David, King of Israel. All of us are made of good and bad. How should that be handled? We should try to suppress the bad and exalt the good. We should amplify or make it to abound. David is in mayhem now. He's killing villagers because he doesn't want anybody to tell it was him. He's lying to the king and telling him that he's raiding Hebrew camps when he's really raiding Philistine camps. David is on the run. And we hope you see that there's some things that we can take away from these lessons to apply to our own lives. Mainly, David is interested in doing God's will. We thank you so much for tuning in this week. Join us next week as we continue in this lesson, Mercy, Mayhem, and Madness. And we've seen mercy. We've seen part of the mayhem. And soon we'll see the madness that influenced David and entered into his life. Please join us. Please read ahead, study with us. Go and look at the text that we'll be looking at, the next chapter, chapter 28. Share these lessons with others. Let others know that you can learn a little bit about the Word of God, and it won't take you a very long time. Join us next week. Share this lesson, like this lesson, and please, always be prayerful and be careful. God bless you.
Show me, Lord, show me the way. Lord, I need you to show. Please, Jesus, show me the way. Because I'm down here, Lord, and I need your awesome power to show me the way. Lord, I'm your child, and I need